people always ask, is SQL going to be there tomorrow, 10 years from now? I think SQL will. Um, I think Fivetran is a good example of a time where software engineers were really needed to create data pipelines using JavaScript, Java, and whatnot, like really sophisticated things. But Fivetran comes out and says, well, what if you didn't need a team of highly paid software engineers to build your data, and you can use a data analyst?
Welcome back to Insights by Design. We're joined today by Andrew Ojeda. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are y'all doing?
We're great.
Good.
Thanks for joining us today. Andrew, for those who haven't come across you yet, could you just give us a quick background of who you are?
Yeah, I would say most people may not have come across me. I would say everybody you've talked to is probably way better at this than I am, but I'll kind of keep it to my hole. But yeah, I'm a Tableau developer. I work at Google right now. I actually run Google's Tableau user group for the entire company. And I kind of help manage that relationship and just bringing different things from Tableau to Google. But yeah, I work specifically. They literally just changed our organization last week. It's platform and devices, but specifically I do like any physical consumer hardware, and that's a good time, as we say Google a lot, to unplug my Google Puck because it will go off a million times. But yeah, I do Pixel phones, tablets, these like little pucks and stuff. Any physical thing Google does, I kind of have a hand on the reverse logistics and the forward planning and whatnot. So, and building dashboards, tons of dashboards.
That's incredibly interesting. And not only is your current position at Google interesting, but you've got a really varied past. And one of the black spots on your past is that you know Michael. How do you two know each other?
That is the liability.
We do go way back, and I think before the recording, we talked about how we're basically brother-in-laws because our wives actually lived together for a time. And so, but we do go way back to days in Minnesota. So it's a long time ago. But it was really fun. We did a lot together in church capacities and whatnot. So good guy.
Now, how did you end up in Minnesota?
It is not what I would have expected. I am originally from California, in the best coast, if you will. And
Ooh, fighting words.
And so I played football a little bit in high school and really never thought Minnesota, but had this inkling that this school that was very obscure, smaller than my high school, was going to be a good fit for me. And so I wanted to play a little bit more football and thought if I ever wanted to leave, I could. Turns out that was not the case. Every time I tried to leave, I was brought back for some reason, but it worked out because, that's where I met my wife and everything. It was terribly cold. My brother went to UCLA, so every summer would show me pictures of him at the beach or sunny weather, and it's negative 40 in Minnesota. And so, yeah, but that's kind of where everything happened. Started my career there, met my wife there, a lot of friends and whatnot. So even though we haven't really been back a ton, I still actually love Minnesota. So, yeah.
And being able to take the lessons from your former roles has, I'm sure, really helped you excel and come with diverse and new perspectives to Google and your other companies. What are some of the lessons that you learned in consulting that have influenced how you approach your projects?
Yeah. Consulting was super fun and amazing because every project was an opportunity to meet new friends. But kind of jokingly, sometimes, obviously, every company has a different business culture. Every person you work with works differently. That has been something I feel like the political world really set me up for, is being able to kind of navigate the personalities, the people who think, I'm a director at this company, I am a big deal, I drive this ship or whatever. And so that's been, something that has been really helpful. I do say this all the time, that the business world has more politics in it than the political world.
Dang.
Yeah, hopefully that's not breaking or anything.
Hot take. Don't get us canceled now.
Wait till you try the academic world. Oh, man.
It's a sad reality, right? And I've brought this up recently to some folks, and it's like, it's not politics. You just have to play different rules. I'm like, that is politics, right? And so, but at least in the political world, who your group is. And I feel like in business, you may not know if someone's just trying to use you to leverage for their next role and stuff. And I found kind of doing the right thing just always pays off in the end. Doing the best. There has been instances where um, people have kind of asked to slow down a little bit, but I'm not going to write the code slower just so we can increment it, right. I'm not going to go from 2 minutes to 30 seconds to 10 seconds to 2 seconds when I can go from 2 minutes to 2 seconds. So it, yeah, it's I would say consulting has played a big part in just kind of like seeing that this is the world we live in. I also will say that consulting, um, there's a lot of industries where I'm wonder how they sell one widget, because so many businesses are labored with bureaucracy and just so many cooks in the kitchen that I honestly have no idea how they could sell one item, let alone be a top 500 company, right?
Mhm. So, as an expert user in Inkscape and the Google Tableau tug leader, you clearly have a keen eye for design, and we can tell by the photos behind you. Even if you say they look pretty good to me. How do you balance visually pleasing design with utility in data visualization?
That it's a hard thing to do, but I will say that if your dashboard is ugly, it will likely be shelfware. People just won't use it. If it has difficult UX, people won't use it. If it's not fast, people won't use it. So you're trying to balance a lot of these things. Um, for me, I the thing I was taught is I want to build a dashboard or report that is your future. I want you to dream up the world you want to live in, and I will build that dream. Physically or functionally may not exist in that way, but for so many times I see people thinking, I want this dashboard to produce this spreadsheet. And then I will take that spreadsheet and spend the next 8 hours spinning up this thing and making this report. Well, why don't I just spend that same amount of time building the end state report and you spend no time building it? So I'm constantly battling stakeholders with what do you want? Like, not what do you think you need? It's what do you want? What's that dream state in reality? And as a developer, it's my job to kind of balance those things. I will say, and with Tableau, it's always the case. Like, you can't do 20 filters on the dashboard and expect it to be super performant. That's any BI tool will have the reasons, and you can get into. Luckily, my team is very data engineering heavy, so I can say this is exactly what the SQL backend looks like. If you do a filter, it's restructuring your data. It's taking forever. It's because it's physically moving your data around.
Mhm.
But to stakeholders, they don't care. They just want to know, like, is this adding time or reducing time? For so long with teams I've seen, it's they build a great dashboard. It takes too long to load. They're going to start stripping out all these functionalities, but without realizing like why is it taking a long time. And so for me, the keen eye is not just the front end; it's the back end, because that's what drives the dashboard. I think if anybody could take away anything from this conversation, it's building a reporting layer for your dashboard. You don't want all your calculations in Tableau, because Tableau is not a calculating machine; it is a visualization machine. If you're if you're using GCP, and I hope you are because it's a great system. Just kidding. But if you're using GCP and you're running extracts, like, you are removing the power and capability of GCP or AWS, whatever you're using. You're taking your monster data compute warehouse and you're giving it to a tool that specializes in visualization, right? And so um, having the understanding of how the front end deals with the back end and how the back end deals with the front end, like, really is an advantage. And I think so many developers may be heavy in one side or the other. And it's okay to be a strong Tableau developer with very little SQL skills. But if you don't know what the SQL is doing, and if you never did this performance testing, you don't see where those gaps are. And I think, to me, that's where that's where the magic happens, when your back end shakes the hand of the front end and everything's great, because you can do great things. If you're up until yesterday, my license plate was big data, and I had to change it for a new car, but the people often think like in old terms still, where big data was, whatever the gap, the limit to Excel was. If you're hitting that 1,062,000, whatever, that's big data. In today's world, that is still small potatoes. We've pushed it from a million to 20 million, and then when Tableau Hyper came out, that really pushed that boundary of like extracts and stuff. And now it's not uncommon to see a really performant dashboard that does a lot of different things with 1 or 2 billion records. And I really think that's where the world is coming to, not for the sake of data collection, but just there's a lot of big problems out there that require a lot of big data solutions. And so if your dashboards out there are slow at 20 million, you really need to seek Jesus and figure out some backend stuff.
Well, in that discussion of data viz and utility, I mean, I just got to say this before handing it off to Andrew. I love the emphasis on asking people to dream and then building their dreams. Although for the rest of the podcast, I'm going to have The Greatest Showman stuck in my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake.
It's a great
and everyone
song.
will hear why I did not pursue a music career. But that's some powerful advice for data analysts. So thank you for sharing that, Andrew.
Yeah, there were a lot of critical concepts that you brought up. One of them being that as an expert of Fivetran, GCP, AWS, you're really a full stack data analyst, bringing those data engineering skills to the front end. We've seen the rise of the analytics engineer. But in your opinion, what are the skills in the future that you think data analysts are going to need to handle this growing amount of data?
Yeah, that comes up quite a bit with people earlier on in their career, especially because SQL has been around for such a long time. People always ask, is SQL going to be there tomorrow, 10 years from now? I think SQL will. I think Fivetran is a good example of a time where software engineers were really needed to create data pipelines using JavaScript, Java, and whatnot, like really sophisticated things. But Fivetran comes out and says, well, what if you didn't need a team of highly paid software engineers to build your data, and you can use a data analyst to do the same thing? Do I think the same thing will exist for SQL? It is a little more difficult. And luckily, the difficulty is mostly human error because building tables is hard, building data models is hard, building pipelines is hard. I think Snowflake is a good example of it, of kind of where it's headed. And it's not changing anything other than the data availability. One of the industries I worked under was commercial airliner. They have a lot of data for another, like sales and whatnot that they partner with. Snowflake now can connect, another company's data with your data, and you have like your agreements and the cost and stuff. But it's no longer, SFTPs. It's God forbid FTPs. You're really moving in a way that the data sets will get larger and hopefully better. Other skill sets would be to, especially for like the visualization side, I really emphasize just understanding how it's working, like what the functionally, like, what each aspect of it is doing, why certain vises over other vises may take longer in processing. I think this is going to be very Tableau specific, but if you're building spreadsheets for people, which I do too, it comes with the gig, using indexes or indices to limit the amount of data that's shown at the front to limit how much processing is happening. Because if you're bringing in everything, which I do, like one of my dashboards is just how long the life of a Pixel phone has existed. Well, I limit it to the last 10 weeks. So when it starts, you're only seeing the last 10, 13 weeks. But the user can decide if they want to see more. And so it's a way of cutting down data speed and whatnot. But these are simple ways of like cutting data to make it smaller for at least the first person to look at. So it could be that if they wanted the last 3 years, it would take forever. But, those small times, they're really focusing on just making sure it's faster. And I think faster speed is what everybody wants, right? Like, I not to throw shade on the great data visionaries and stuff, former Zen masters. I was looking up this thing. All I wanted to do was change what the title says to be dynamic, or the totals to be dynamic. So it's just like regional totals, right? America, region, European, whatever. And the solution was basically duplicating your data. So each region has a thing and it could be consolidated. And when I'm dealing with a billion records, the last thing I want to do is duplicate my data source. And so I often think that the great visualizations that you see, they're really pushing the boundaries of Tableau. But I can't really utilize a lot of those for these like data sets, right? Like the volume of data doesn't allow me to do it. So I really love looking at some great visualizations, but at the end of the day, like in the corporate world, it's not feasible to do some of that stuff. So.
So you've notoriously cold applied to Google, as you mentioned, and successfully landed a role. I'd like to know, what is your process for finding, applying, and nailing the interview when you look for a new job?
um, Finding the role is always, it's, I would say as you progress, it gets a little easier because you have a little bit more experience under your belt. The thing that would probably differentiate me the most, I mean, I do have a website, but I'll mention that in a second. I have a Tableau public. That's not, it's not the greatest work I do, but it shows that I can do some work. Some of the dashboards I might be embarrassed about now, but have to go clean up. But um, honestly, when I talked to my manager later, my current manager, he let me know that I didn't need to take the Tableau test because he saw that I had the Tableau skills already because I had a portfolio that I could show off. And if you're just graduating or about to graduate, I highly encourage like a portfolio, especially in the UX and data viz side, because we can show our work in a way that's maybe a lot harder for a data engineer or a software engineer to do because no one wants to look at code and evaluate, is that code slightly better than somebody else's code, right? And so, but cold applying, I think this is my third or fourth job where I cold applied and got the interview and ended up getting the job. It is obviously easier if you have somebody on the inside to help you. I applied to Google on a Friday, heard back on Monday. So something
Oh,
with the skill of my resume really spoke out to it. And another thing that I heard is they were kind of looking for something else, and then they saw me and realized this kind of fit the bill more than what they were needing. And so Google and maybe other companies as well, but I know Google is often looking not for a piece to fit the puzzle, but a piece to expand the puzzle. Roles and whatnot that can help currently, but also help kind of future projects and whatnot. I could talk more about the interview process. It's very fun. I love the movie The
yes,
Internship.
tell us all of your secrets that you legally can.
I mean, I love the movie The Internship and probably watched it 100 times before the interview, 100 times after the interview. When I got the job, like first day, probably watched it. It's a hilarious movie, not 100% accurate to the life at Google itself, but really funny. Um, the questions are definitely different, but any advice you'll see is it's not about the question itself; it's about the thinking, the rationale, and being able to articulate why you think this way. And that's such good advice for any role: is are you able to articulate a difficult concept in a way that somebody else can understand what you're thinking? It may not be the right thinking, but I can tell you, having seen the rubric, there is no right way to think about some of these problems. At least on our side, I don't know software engineer, but I will say we I had to do coding in a Google Doc while somebody watches, which is, it doesn't tell you when your code is wrong. It doesn't tell you if it'll run or not. And obviously, it's very nerve wracking because you're trying to get this job at a company you may or may not really want to work at. But it is quite the experience. I got really lucky. Um, I may or may not say this, but I did turn it down several times because I really enjoyed my last role in working with that team. And so it ended up working out, and they they made an offer that I just could not refuse. And obviously, it's Google and the prestige of it, so it's nice. The unfortunate reality is it may just be like any other job. There's a lot of corporate overhead as well. They just happen to also be, feed you really nicely. I will say shout out to the Atlanta food team because they are fantastic. And so there's a lot of perks with it, but the core day to day, it's not much different building these dashboards as it was building political dashboards 10 years ago. It's the same tools, kind of, different flavors, but same stuff. And I think some people may be disappointed when they find out that it's just a corporate job.
I'll be in Atlanta in a couple of weeks. We should go out to dinner
You should come
at
over for
Google.
lunch. Come to lunch. We only do lunch and breakfast at the Atlanta office, but you're more than
Well,
welcome.
well, and other than watching the internship 100 times, what preparation actions or resources did you find particularly helpful in preparing for your interview at Google?
Yeah, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. Also, shout out to the YouTube team. I did have a friend. I won't say her name, but actually, she was in Minnesota with us, Michael, who
Mm,
worked at Google
I'll
for a
figure it
while.
out.
I'll tell you. I don't want to shout out her name now, but I'll tell you later. But um, she worked. She works there still, but for a while she was on the recruiting team, and so she had told me a million times to apply to Google. I applied because I really didn't think I would get it without even asking her. But as I went through the process, she did give me a lot of feedback of like, here's kind of what they're expecting and whatnot. And um, you know, she did a lot of work with me, and I feel like when people ask, like I feel obligated to kind of share what she had done. But I will say it's kind of the same stuff also that you'll see on a lot of YouTube videos of people who've gone through the process and sharing their knowledge. It's um, the statistics are kind of wild on like how to get in, how many times people take to get in. I was a one and done kind of guy. Like that was my first time applying to Google. Um, so it's possible. Um, but yeah, it's I think being authentic, but also being having the skills kind of that they're looking for is unfortunately really important right now. Not looking to upskill people at this point with so few roles and availability just because of the economy. But I think at one point it will return to kind of taking shots on people again, and hopefully, you know, more people can join the team.
So is that a strategy that anyone can apply, Andrew? Does Google and other big companies that you're aware of welcome people reaching out to their recruiters, or do you usually wait for recruiters to come to you?
I I don't know. I've had success just cold applying. I did it at Slalom. I apologize. Obviously, Google's going to let me know that they're listening. I'm just kidding. Um,
You can fix it in post.
um, Slalom, the data analytics job at i360, the political company. I think my recommendation would be to, everything now is um, machine learning and AI based. Your resume will not go to a human being until it goes through some of these processing. Understanding how that works is definitely my advice because I wouldn't say like I changed my resume for Google. It's just I had all the tools and stuff that they needed, making sure you have things that you worked on there. I probably think tools are more important than like the actual lines you're saying on your resume, just to
Mm.
get you that interview. And there's a couple really good YouTube channels right now that just show like what recruiters are looking at. You're only looking at the first two lines and like the left side to see what companies you had worked for. But even my last company was only 30 people. Also, shout out to Analytic Vision because I didn't come from a giant consulting company. I was at Slalom, but my last company was 30 people. I was number 10, and we were just trying to build something, and they're still building it. But like, um, it goes to show that like even where you're at now is not going to stifle you. So if you're at a role where you really enjoy it, and you shouldn't feel like, oh well, do I need to go to a bigger company to stand out more? That might be the case when you're looking at like director level and senior management, but like earlier on in the career, it really doesn't matter where you are. If you're enjoying the role, you're well compensated, and you feel like you're making a difference, if you will, at least to the people around you. I will say my wife is a psychologist. She does way more for the world than I do. Um, so, and if the world fell apart, nobody needs a data visualizer. They will need psychologists. So I will be out
Mm.
of the job. So.
Well, keeping that perspective is important. And part of that, you've mastered Tableau, you've mastered backend systems, you're leading one of the most influential Tableau user groups in the world. What are some insights that you've had now that you'd share with either your younger self or analysts just starting out?
The it's it it's kind of a grind, but not in like a working hard and trying to get ahead kind of thing. it's taking those steps to where you kind of want to go. I would say it also is very important to know where you want to go. I think in the habits of highly effective people, they mentioned that you can climb a ladder only to realize at the end of the climb it wasn't on the wall that you had intended. And I think a lot of people may go through and thinking, I want to, be this or be that, only to realize when you get there that your priorities are in the wrong spot. Um, I took a sales job one time. My dad, background for that, my dad did it for like 10, 15 years at this same company, same role. And I thought, I had worked in politics, I should be able to sell stuff. And, a month later, I'm in the parking lot calling my mom crying. It's really early in my career, being like, this wasn't the job for me. And she's like, I knew it wouldn't be. That's not like your personality. It's not who you want to be. You're very different than, my dad. I just like the challenge of, other things than like trying to sell. And so I think, but having the negative experience at Georgia Pacific, has really like refined me. And I think I'm trying to understand the failure, and like it, it seems really bad and daunting at the time, but in hindsight, like those failures and whatnot are kind of what define you. It's unfortunate, but I can't trade that experience for anything, because I now know I cannot do sales, right? I now know that like a corporate job where I'm just copying and pasting may not be the role for me. And I'd replace somebody who did that for like 30 years. Like I could not imagine that role for 30 years, but again, it wasn't for me. And so just kind of finding out what you like, what you um, enjoy, but hopefully that also brings money, because you can't, pay the bills with your satisfaction at work. So
So to thine own self be true, but also make some money.
I am really blessed that the thing I really enjoy also makes money. So yeah.
As the great Dave Chappelle says, the great philosopher, you can do what you love if you're good at it and if they're hiring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, this was incredibly interesting. I hope we can have a round two. There's so many more questions that I'd love to ask you, but I know we're at time. Andrew, thank you so much. Where can people find you if they want to look up more and learn more about you?
Yeah. I do have a website, andrewojeda.com. It's whatever, but I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I don't do, well, I guess X, but I'm at Andrew Ojeda for both of those. Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the place where it's easiest to contact me, but I am on X all the time looking at football stuff. So you'll see all my football things on there. I want to get into the data thing a lot more. I'll also be at Tableau conference in a couple weeks if people are headed out that way. So feel free to reach out and try to.
Beautiful. San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Andrew, thank you so much. We'll drop all the links below. Have a wonderful day.
Cool. I appreciate it. Thanks, y'all.
All right. See ya.